welcome to Eye on Horror, the official podcast of iHorror.com. This is episode 126, otherwise known as Season 7, Episode 7. I am your host, James J. Edwards, and with me, as always, is your other host, Jacob Davison. How you doing, Jacob?
Doing good. I celebrated my birthday this weekend.
Cool. How was that?
It was fun. Jonathan was there. We'll get into it later, but I decided to celebrate this year by doing a living wake.
Also with us, as always, is your other host, John Correia. How you doing, Correia?
Doing pretty good. A little upset I didn't get anything from the Jacob Davison estate. Like, wow. Ask me to speak at your wake, but I don't get anything.
You had to spend the night in a haunted house. No, I'm taking it with me to the grave. I'm being buried with my Blu-rays like an Egyptian pharaoh.
Just make a coffin out of VHS tapes. Actually,
yeah, you could do that.
I could. We could just repurpose the ones I built into shelves, I guess.
Yeah, VHS coffin. Boom.
Yeah. Oh, man, that would be so heavy, dude. Let me tell you, that VHS shelf I built, I fear the day we move out of this apartment because that thing is so huge and just like barely held together. And yeah, it's probably not going to make it.
Well, what's been going on this week? I saw something just last night that's super cool. I saw Furiosa, the Mad Max saga. Yeah,
fucker.
Jealous.
It is. It's everything you expect from a George Miller Mad Max movie. It's not quite as stunt laden as Fury Road because Fury Road was basically just one big chase movie, And this one, there are chases in it. But there's a little more of a story. It's basically the origin story for Furiosa, but it shows how she was taken from the green place, and then she got kind of past Thor. Chris Hemsworth plays a character called Dementus, and he's got the most ridiculous prosthetic nose. It's hilarious. Like as soon as he turns his face around and you see him, it's like, it's him, but he's got like this, who's the dude from Digital Underground? The Humpty Hump guy.
Dude,
Yeah.
That's what it kind of looks like. And the whole place, it kind of like broke the mood. Everyone kind of started laughing, but he kind of rises through power through the wasteland. So you get to see the politics between the Citadel, Bullet Town, and Gas Town, and it's a pretty serviceable origin story. There, instead of jumping Supercross motorcycles and Cirque du Soleil pole guys, you've got like paragliders and it's new stuff. It's George Miller stuff. It's him saying, how can I show off this time? So, there's a lot of cool. Dementus rides this chariot that is pulled by 3 motorcycles, and there's no one on these motorcycles, so he's controlling it from the chariot. It's actually it's pretty fun. And he also has a monster truck that is like a 6-wheel monster truck. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it's fun. It'll satisfy it'll scratch the Mad Max itch that everyone's got. And it does, this was my big concern. It does show how Furiosa loses her arm.
Oh,
so
nice.
If you were wondering about that,
garbage disposal. That was my guess. She dropped something in the garbage disposal and it just ate the whole arm. That was my guess, but
my guess was an alligator attack, and it's not that.
There's not that many alligators in the desert.
She had to chop her own hand off after it got possessed by deadites with a chainsaw.
With a chainsaw. Got into her arm and it went bad.
Kandarian demons. Can't live with them. You definitely can't live with them. I was always stoked for Furiosa. I know some people were complaining, it's not like Fury Road, but like Fury Road was a chase sequence the entire movie, and that was epic and awesome. But like, and there was a lot of really great world building within that. But like, yeah, dude, you can't just do it again. You got to do something different. So people complaining, I don't know. Everyone's always trying to find some controversy. I saw one review where someone raved about it, and then someone immediately was like, "This." They also said The Last Jedi was good, and it's like, dude, come on, get over it.
They're never going to get over it. They're still going to be pissed about The Last Jedi till the end of time.
And The Last Jedi was good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was better than any of the prequel ones, I thought, but it was no Rogue One, but
Yeah, we'll see. Speaking of Australian Dan Stevens, because that's what everyone calls Chris Hemsworth.
Where'd you get Dan Stevens from that?
Well, because everyone calls Chris Hemsworth the Australian Dan Stevens, obviously.
I thought Dan Stevens was the British Chris Hemsworth.
No, Chris Hemsworth is the Australian Dan Stevens. But that was a terrible transition. Anyways, so I finished watching Star Trek Voyager the other day, so I'm on my break from Trek show. So I decided to finally finish / revisit Legion, the FX show, which dude, that first season is phenomenal. I just blasted through it. It's that whole show, that whole first season. It's a possession story, which is fucking awesome. But not only that, but you also get one episode where you get to see Dan Stevens' butt and he sings Rainbow Connection in the same episode. So it's like they're trying to like keep me forever crushing on Dan Stevens. So yeah, Legion rules. But the other show that I got into, have you guys heard of or watched Dead Boy Detectives yet?
I've heard about that. It's the spinoff from Sandman, and it is also a Neil Gaiman story.
Yeah, its development is interesting because it is a DC property, and it's about these two dead boys who are detectives. One died in like 1916, and the other one died in the 80s. And the one that died in 1916 spent 70 years in hell due to a technicality.
Damn.
And he escaped, and so they solve ghosts mysteries and their unfinished business, all while evading death because they're supposed to have crossed over. So every time they solve one, they have to hide. And it's interesting development because while they were like in the Sandman comics, they've been brought over into other DC comics. Like a lot of characters, like John Constantine was in Swamp Thing, and then he got pulled into Sandman, and it's a whole crossroad things. But originally, Dead Boy Society made their appearance in Doom Patrol, and were going to be a part of the Doom Patrol Titans DC universe. But Warner Brothers ended up selling it to Netflix, and so Netflix made it a part of the Sandman universe. Which, thank God, because this show is basically like, if you liked Sandman but thought it's not as like if you were sitting there like, oh man, Sandman's good, but I wish this was like a lot queerer, this is that show. It is like, I don't know if there's a single straight character in that show, and it's fantastic. It's so funny. It's so weird. Lucas Cage plays the Cat King in it, and he's just like constantly hitting on one of the guys. There's some like really great stuff with supernatural, folk tale-y horrors brought in. It's got this like really nice, like campy but very Gen Z energy to it. Dead Boy Detectives. It's a lot of fun. There's like 8 episodes and it's on Netflix. So yeah, check it out. And also keep building the Sandman universe. That's all I want, is just more Sandman spinoffs and series and seasons, and yeah, keep it going.
Yeah, I think this next season of Sandman's coming next year, I think.
Not soon enough. Not soon enough.
No, true. Speaking of death, king of transitions. So I celebrated my birthday over the weekend by doing a living wake, inspired by that one episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm with Albert Brooks. Although I was not revealed as a COVID hoarder.
That's what the bit was, because someone mentioned that. I think it was Dustin claimed you were a COVID hoarder. Yeah. And I was like, there's a reference here I'm missing, but like it's on the tip of the tongue. It was Curb. Got you. Okay.
Wasn't there a living wake in the MASH movie, Correia? There was a guy who wanted to kill himself, so they held like a funeral for him before he did, and that's when they actually sing suicide. Have you not seen the MASH movie? You just a TV show guy?
What's the sudden shaming of Correia happening? Oh, what? You only watched the MASH TV show? You've never seen the movie?
You're a fake fan.
It wasn't a shame. It was a question.
You know, it's the MASH movie is kind of like season 3 of Ash versus the Evil Dead. I haven't it's been so long since, like, I think the MASH movie I haven't seen since I was a kid, and I haven't watched it yet because once I do, then I'm out of MASH to watch. It's kind of like how Ash versus the Evil Dead has never ended for me because I never watched the 3rd season.
Oh, okay.
And so like it's just delaying the inevitable.
The MASH movie, I saw it after I had watched a bunch of the TV show, and it's jarring because none of the same actors are in it. Or
Except
not
Radar.
Yeah, not none of them, but it's a different Hawkeye and it's a different Trapper. I mean, it's a little jarring. But yeah, in that one of the characters is depressed. He's going to kill himself, so they hold like a funeral for him while he's alive, and that's when you get to hear all of the lyrics to "Suicide is Painless." Because there's like 6 verses of lyrics.
Yeah. Which I love the story of the theme for MASH because like I guess it was the director asked his son to just write something that sounds like of the time, and so his very young son like threw that together, and then because they adapted it into the show and they just used the instrumentals of it, he's made more money than his father did on the movie with all the reruns and the 11 seasons and all that. Damn it, Jay, don't bring up MASH now with the temptation of rewatch MASH.
Yeah, and it's completely overshadowed my birthday.
Yeah, back to Jacob's birthday. So I did give a eulogy. It was very moving. It was very beautiful. A lot of people were crying over my words. And of course, had to play a song that matched the moment, which of course was the Monster Squad rap.
Yes.
At the Monster Squad.
As I would have wanted.
Brought a boombox, played it on cassette, held it over my head, say anything. It was very moving, very emotional. And it was in a comic book store.
Yeah, which was also fitting. And I was in an actual coffin.
When he says he was in an actual coffin.
An actual nylon coffin.
Jacob's coffin was one of those like not inflatable. It was like you twist it to pack it away, and it was nylon. And he was like, maybe you were like, what, 6 inches too tall for it, and so your knees were sticking up. And we had you up on a folding table that just like looked like if you were just like a few pounds bigger, would have collapsed. Oh man, it was such a beautiful sight.
Yeah, no, just I had a bunch of friends over. We did a blast from the past, and just had everybody eulogize me, and a lot of them were roasting my dead ass. But there was a lot of actual sentimentality, and people were honoring my memory, and it was just nice to have everybody together. And then we had some cake and pizza, just hung out, reminisced. So I gotta say, in terms of birthday parties, it was pretty high up there as being one of the best.
Now, if they were roasting you, did you get to rise from the dead and roast back like at usual roasts?
Yeah, actually, I kind of did. Like I came to life at the end as a vampire and gave a speech of my own. Although mine was more about appreciating life and how, as a horror fan, you see people die so much that it makes you appreciate being alive. And I did throw a couple zingers back.
A lot of people roasted you for loving Demon Wind.
Yeah, yes, they did.
Which I didn't know was a thing we could do because you were the one that convinced me to buy Demon Wing. We were at a convention and you were like, look at this cover. Isn't this great? And I went, ooh, shiny thing, shiny lithograph. And yeah. So I didn't realize how much of a impact you had on people's lives by essentially forcing them to watch Demon Wing.
Yeah, pretty much. And they hate me for it, but they'll never forget Demon Win. So in the end, I win.
I still have that Blu-ray. I can't get rid of it. It's still every time I'm like, Demon Win's not that good of a movie. Am I ever going to revisit it? And then look at the cover again. I'm like, shiny thing. We're keeping it.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny how the marketing of the original VHS with the holographic cover transitioned to the Blu-ray and how nothing has changed. Like if a VHS or Blu-ray has a cool hologram or lithograph cover,
it's the lizard brain. It's the shiny lizard brain. Yeah.
Also came out this week that I saw The Strangers Chapter 1. And I know that I was kind of excited about this. Here's the deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
How did everybody think that it was a prequel? Because I know was it marketed
as Chapter
as a
1, people thought it was a prequel, so it was supposed to be like an origin.
Yeah, but it's not. It's a straight remake of the 2008 movie. And like very straight, like beat for beat remake, to the point where when there's a shotgun introduced and there's a character that says they're coming by later, you know, if you've seen the 2008 one, what's going to happen to this character. I mean, it's that point. You're like, you know, it's beat for beat the same movie. They do introduce a little more of the town beforehand. And I don't know if it's because the lead actors aren't as good of actors as Scott Speedman and Liv Tyler, or if it's just the writing, but for some reason you don't really care about the lead characters. It also might have something to do with the fact that you know what's going to happen to them, because once you figure out that it is a straight remake, which is, you know, somewhere about at the end of the first act, you're like, they're doing The Strangers. You kind of just, you realize you're like, okay, these people are both they're fodder.
Yeah.
So it kind of feels more like a slasher movie than a home invasion movie. What I think that they do really well, it's getting slaughtered by the critics. People are hating this movie, and I don't think it's as bad as people say it is. And the only thing I can think of is people were not expecting it to be just a flat remake. It reminds me of those Platinum Dunes movies that came out in the early 2000s, you know, when they started doing like the Friday the 13th, the Texas Chainsaw, you know, all those remakes. It's kind of like that. It's a modernization. That was the first thing that told me it wasn't a prequel, is that there are things like Airbnb and iPhones. And I'm like, but they didn't even have those things when they were doing the first movie. So that's how I knew it wasn't a prequel from the beginning. But the thing that they do right is they really capture that whole that, you know, now you see him, now you don't, that the killers do. There's one scene in particular that's actually was really effective for me, is the woman is, it's when the guy goes out and leaves her there by herself, which happens in the original too. And she sits down and is playing piano. And it's a long shot behind her, and you see above the piano, you think it's a painting because there's like texture to it, and you think it's a painting, and then it cuts away to something else, and it cuts back, and there's a chair there, and you realize one of the killers was sitting there. It's a mirror, and you're like, oh, they're in the house with their, you know, there's things like that where you're always looking in the background, and you're like, you know, and it's to the point where you think you see stuff that isn't there, you know, which was the same with the original. So Rennie Harlin did get that right. He really captured the tension of the original, you know, with his imagery. But writing wise, yeah, it's not. I mean, it's a beat for beat remake, and you just don't care as much about it. But the thing is, it does end with the end of The Strangers. So chapter 2 and 3 are going to go into new territory, because I doubt they're going to do Pray at Night with this. At least I hope they don't. But what scares me is I'm hoping that introducing the other people of this little podunk town at the beginning of chapter 1, I'm hoping that doesn't play too much into to 2 and 3, because what it did, it almost looked like it started introducing suspects. So you start thinking, you're like, okay, well, is the waitress in that cafe, was she one, you know, pinup girl, or, you know, was that, you know, mechanic, was that the guy in the mask? You know, it starts making you think. Whereas the thing about The Strangers is you had no idea when they're unmasked at the end of Pray at Night and they actually talk. You're like, we've never seen these people before. You know, you're not supposed to know who they are. So I feel like they're going somewhere where there's going to be like a Scooby-Doo unmasking at the end of 2 or 3, which is going to kind of take away from what The Strangers is. But it's not as bad as people are making it out to be. People are really lambasting it. And I think it's because they're expecting something new, and it's not. It's The Strangers.
Well, in everyone's defense, that's all they've been saying is like a terrifying new vision of the thing. Or Rennie Harlin saying, well, you can't remake and do what they did before. So yeah, we're not remaking. We're doing something completely different. And it's like, just at least be a little honest of like, we're essentially doing the first one again to set up for something new. And it's like, okay, but it's already doing decent. I mean, I think the whole trilogy, they said they shot it for like 8 or 9 million, and it's already made 10 at the box office. So
it made 12.
Or it made 12,
and I heard that the actual budget, maybe it is for the whole trilogy, but I thought it was just for chapter 1, was 8.5. So it has made its money back. But when you make a movie that cheap, how can you not make your money back? I mean, They'll make their money back on VOD when it's that cheap.
But you also have to advertise 3 movies now, which is half the budget each time. So I'm curious if if this doesn't do super well, or chapter 2 doesn't do super well, what that's going to do to affect the release of chapters 2 and 3, because they haven't, I don't believe they formally announced when those are coming out, just like general time.
Yeah, it's general time, but they're coming out in the next year. But yeah, they haven't given actual dates. But yeah, it's. I mean, the thing is with it is, and this was our first clue that they didn't have a lot of confidence in it. They didn't screen it for press, so it was one of those T-Mobile Tuesday deals. There was like a $5 movie ticket, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go see this because I want to see it, and and it was $5, which you can't really beat that these days. Yeah, it's not as bad as everyone says it is. But it's still, I mean, I think the original Strangers is a masterpiece. I mean, you guys know that. I love that movie. Yeah. So it's not nearly as good as the original, but it is pretty much beat for beat a remake, which I don't think people were expecting.
One thing that I know we all watched, because we have a very special guest this week involved with it, was NightWatch, Demons Are Forever. What'd you guys think? My question for you guys, because we got screeners for this earlier in the week, and then the movie just came out on Shudder on Friday, and there was no way of getting my hands on the first one, so I went in knowing nothing about NightWatch, the original movie.
I had seen the Ewan McGregor American remake, but not the original Danish one, so I kind of knew what was going on. But no, I didn't. I hadn't seen the original.
So this is a sequel to the 30-year-old original Nightwatch, the Danish film, where it follows Martin, played by Nicolas Coster-Waldau, who went on to do Game of Thrones and all that. But this was like his original star-making role, and it follows him and his daughter as they kind of are still dealing with like the PTSD and all of that from the original film. And kind of like the return of the killer from the original, Wormer. There's some choices in this movie, and I really, really enjoyed them.
Oh yeah, it almost goes. It kind of goes Silence of the Lambs in a couple places where like the old killer's got like a little apprentice. I mean, and the thing is, it takes these turns like anytime you look, and one of the turns totally got me. One of the not the turn itself, but I thought I had something figured out that I didn't. And I don't want to go into it because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't watched it. But there was one point where they make this big discovery, and I'm like, okay, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. It's not that easy to figure out.
Well, it's interesting because like the father is clearly still haunted from the events from the first movie, and the mother killed herself in the in between. So it's him and the daughter dealing with it, and so the daughter thinks it's a good idea because she finds out that the killer is still alive. He's just in a institution, but at this point he's blind and borderline mute and all that. And so she goes to visit him and to record a video as essentially say, this is what's keeping you up at night. This guy, he's not a threat at all. Dad, get over it. Well, not get over it, but like, let's move on. Let's do better. And then she spits on his face.
Yeah, he's like this feeble, blind, imprisoned guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, once she she's trying to prove to her dad, this is nothing to be afraid of.
But then a copycat starts doing similar kills with the scalping and everything, and so it becomes a whole thing. But I really, I don't know if enjoyed is the word, but I really appreciated the different take on like survivors, because we've seen the Sarah Connor, Jamie Lee Curtis, like, all right, since the first movie, I've been doing pull-ups and getting beefy, or like getting into like setting up Rambo-esque traps everywhere. Whereas this one, a lot of the people that were in the first movie, and when you catch up with them later, they're just depressed addicts, and it is rough. Some of the scenes, there's one in particular where they're having dinner with one of the survivors, played by Kim Bodina, who played.
This is the scene I was thinking of where they're talking about what happened finally.
Yeah, and they're just like at this lovely dinner, and they're just nonchalantly talking about. So yeah, how often do you think about killing yourself? Oh, all the time. And it's just like this very like nonchalant, very blunt conversation, and I'm like, damn, dude. And it's really well done. Just the bluntness of talking about these things, and yeah, there is a bit of a mystery. There's a few points where it makes you go, what? Who is it? Who's doing this? And a couple red herrings. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with it.
I fell hook, line, and sinker for one of the red herrings. I know I discussed it with you, off mic, Correia, and I don't want to mention my folly because it might be a bit of a spoiler if someone else falls for it as well. But that dinner scene you're talking about, like the guy when the dad escaped from him, it was him and was it his brother or his friend or something? It
was a friend,
in order to escape, this guy had to cut off the thumb on his non-dominant hand to get out of these handcuffs in order to kill. Well, he shot him. He didn't kill him, the killer. So there's a constant reminder that this dude's missing this thumb. So, and that's one of the things they're talking about. They're like, there's no way we can ever forget this. Like, every time I look down at my left hand, I mean, it's really well done with the not survivor's guilt, but, survivor's trauma, the PTSD that these people have from this traumatic experience.
Yeah. And it's also really good to see the best friend for Terminator 2 still working. No, one of the actresses has an orange redheaded mullet and
totally has a Danny Cooksey look.
All I could think of is, oh man, that arcade scene in Terminator 2. But she was cool as shit. I mean, like, yeah. I had a lot of fun with it. I do want to revisit or watch the original NightWatch and the American remake because they seem fun.
The original is along with Demons Are Forever is on Shudder too. So I don't know if the Ewan McGregor one is, but the 94 one and the new one are both on Shudder.
Yeah. No, well, now it is. It wasn't until the night before we were doing stuff it wasn't made available. So yeah. Yeah. And then I think the English remake is also available digitally. But yeah, you can watch both.
I've never seen the English version.
I mean, that's a stacked cast, so that's why I'm interested. But I want to watch the original first, of course.
Now let's bring in our special guest for the episode. Today we've got Ceiri Torjussen. Did I say that right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay. I was a little worried about that. Ceiri Torjussen, the composer of the new NightWatch Demons Are Forever. How you doing, Ceiri?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here. The question I always like to start off with all of our guests is, how'd you get started? What was your path to becoming a big time composer?
I don't know about big time, but yeah, I was playing music since I was very young, playing the trumpet and the piano and the saxophone. I was in bands and orchestras and all the rest of it, and later sort of funk and soul bands. And then I did a degree in music in England at York, just in composition and music theory and history. And then I did a master's, came to USC in LA and did a master's in composition, not in film music. But along the way, my dad was making documentaries and news programs for the local TV station. And so my first little bits of working in the business were doing little bits of music for my dad's documentaries. When I was a teenager, which was kind of hilarious, especially since I wouldn't want to advertise that music anymore. But I
was going to say anything we would have seen, but if you don't want people looking for it, then
So I got my first taster then, and then I came to USC and did a master's in composition. I didn't study the film music course. I just did sort of classical composition, and then that was 25 years ago. And then I started scoring. I was doing student films and I was at USC. And then my first kind of proper job in the business was I got a job orchestrating for Marco Beltrami, the composer.
Oh, he's awesome.
Yeah, his stuff is amazing. And he's been a mentor to me ever since. And I watched Scream, the first Wes Craven Scream. And I heard the music and I thought, what an amazing score, and who scored this? And I thought, well, if there's anyone I'm going to work with, it'll be, maybe that guy. So I sent him my music, and miraculously he listened to it and really liked it, and mostly my concert music. And then we met up, and he came to my final concert at USC and said, "Do you want to orchestrate for me?" So I started working for Marco.
Was it really that easy? You just sent him your music and he's like, "Oh, I like this guy. I wonder if he needs work."
I mean, I was incredibly lucky. It was a total shot. He was literally the only composer I sent my stuff to when I was at USC, because I needed someone to sponsor me for my visa at the time as well. And I was like, I got it. Not only am I broke and do I need money, but I need a sponsor. And amazingly, he responded and really liked my music. We have sort of similar backgrounds. He also studied concert music and wrote a lot of concert music in his younger years. So I guess he related to me on that level. And then, I just started orchestrating for him. And our first gig was Dracula 2000.
Yeah.
The movie, which was pretty fun, which was amazing. It was a huge orchestra. It was about a 95-piece orchestra at Torreia, which was my first gig, which was pretty terrifying, but really fun.
That's awesome. And I mean, I love those Dracula movies. And then you scored the third one, right?
Yeah, I co-scored the third one with a friend of mine, Kevin Cleach. And then, but along the way, I was doing a lot of indie stuff of my own, a lot of shorts, and then a lot of indie film, a lot of indie features. And kind of that's what I've been doing ever since. I've been doing a lot of indie features, mostly, I guess, dramas and horror films and thrillers, the odd comedy thrown in. For light relief, and then documentaries. I worked on a lot of documentaries and some animation. I've done a lot of animation as well. So I've sort of done a bit of everything.
So your entry into the film music world was as an orchestrator and a conductor?
Yeah, conducting when there was nobody else to do it and they were desperate, but orchestrating mostly. Yeah, I was, and it was, and you only really get orchestrators on bigger budget movies because they're the only ones that have budget. So it was working for Marco mostly as an orchestrator. And so I really learned the business from that side. And then composing on my own stuff was more gradual. I started, amassing the gear, and because 25 years ago, you needed typically more than one computer to write a score. These days, you can basically do it on an iPhone. Kind of. But no, that's an exaggeration. I'd still have lots of computers. But no, the orchestrating was a real entry point and an amazing learning experience.
And some of the movie, like you said, you have like orchestrators and conductors on big budget stuff. Some of the stuff you've orchestrated, I, Robot, The Day After Tomorrow, Hellboy. I mean, this is big name stuff. So we're talking to a celebrity here.
Well, I wouldn't call it, very much behind the scenes, but
the orchestrator's not really the name above the title.
No, exactly. But no, I mean, it was amazing on those shows. And I, being in the studio, in the booth, watching Marco's interaction with the directors was invaluable. We were there with Guillermo del Toro on 2 movies, and watching him in the studio is pretty hilarious. Just kind of his demeanor and his honesty about the music, which was pretty funny. And I learned a lot. I learned as much about people and relationships as I did about music and the orchestra. But it was I'd written quite a bit for orchestra before, but to that extent and having to do it that quickly and that much was an amazing learning curve.
Yeah. And looking over, you said you work on just about everything genre wise, but one of the big things is like you do a lot of docuseries and also and then a lot of these big narratives. What's like one of the big differences between these? Because whenever I think of someone doing a like TV series, I can't help but think of Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where he's talking about just doing like the ominous tone, and is there a bit of truth to that, or is it
with docuseries you mean, or?
Yeah, docuseries, TV series to like more narrative feature lengths.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think narrative TV is as cinematic these days as features. As far as docuseries goes, there's 2 sort of main differences I find between doing documentaries and doing narrative. One is there tends to be consistent talking in documentaries, unless you're doing a nature show, which is, a lot of landscapes and what have you. But typically it's a lot of talking heads. And so you can't draw too much attention to the music. You've really got to be in the background. You got to support, and you got to give momentum to the picture, support what they're saying, but not go over the top. Whereas with narrative, you're paid to go over the top and to, when necessary, to really push the buttons. So yeah, that's one thing. The other one is often in documentaries, more often than in narrative, you often write music before you get picture, which is cool because the editors then can cut to your music. And it's actually quite liberating musically not to be confined to picture once in a while. So I really enjoy that, both of those aspects, really.
Yeah, it's like you were saying, taking the break and doing a comedy, bouncing between them, stretching, flexing those muscles and stretching a bit. I do have to ask, because you composed the music for Sharksploitation, which was one of my favorite documentaries.
Oh, you saw it? Oh, great.
Oh, I love watching documentaries about genres.
Yeah.
How tempting was it to kind of do your own like Jaws theme or take on the Jaws theme with it?
It's funny. So that was a great project. That my brother-in-law, Steve Scarlata, directed it. My wife's sister's husband. And we talked a lot about it. And I've done a lot of big monster stuff. I've done Big Ass Spider and Primal Rage, and the first thing Steve said was, I don't want monster music. I want it to be more minimalist, almost kind of like John Carpenter-y or Tubular Bells-y, Okay. I want this kind of definitely a more 80s vibe and more of a kind of minimalist vibe, because for him the film was about, of course it was about monsters, but it was the heart of the film was about science, was about like the environment and what Jaws did ultimately to marine conservation and the fact that people started killing sharks. And so he wanted to speak to that narrative aspect of the film. So I went down a whole trip of synths and kind of that kind of vibe, which was really fun. So yeah, I there was one or two cues that got really big. I think the Sharknado section got really big and bombastic, which kind of you have to. But otherwise, I kept it fairly kind of low key and kind of minimalist. Oh, sorry. Incidentally, Steve made Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys have seen that.
Oh, yeah. We love Jodorowsky's Dune. Yeah.
And he wrote and produced that. He was like the brains behind that film, which is a fantastic film.
That's an amazing. I mean, I wish that we could have gotten Jodorowsky's Dune. That's the closest we'll get to seeing Jodorowsky's Dune is that film. We love that movie.
Yeah. That's still my favorite Dune movie. I mean, I like all the other Dune movies, but Jodorowsky's Dune is still
pretty great. We should have Steve on the podcast. He'd be great.
Oh, yeah, would love to.
We would love to.
Huge cinephile.
What was it like making the transition from orchestrator to composer? I mean, clearly you're writing your own stuff instead of just arranging other people's, but what was that like?
It's a totally different hat. When you're orchestrating, you're getting another composer's cue, and you're realizing it for the orchestra. It's a very creative job, but it's quite a mechanical job as well. You're getting the sequencer file and then you're figuring out what's important, then you're getting it on score paper, and you are making, with Marco it was great because I could get quite creative with what we did and add stuff and be creative that way. But ultimately you had to serve what the cue is doing. You can't go nuts and do something else. So you're serving the music. But with your own stuff, then, you really have a blank slate, and I could do what I want theoretically, so long as the director's happy. So yeah, it's quite a different discipline, even though they're both very musical jobs.
Now, is it common to have, you said that when working with Marco, you would have like Guillermo del Toro in the room. Is that common to have the director in the room while the composing's happening?
No, I meant in the scoring stage.
Okay. When you're like recording.
When we're doing the orchestra.
Okay.
Then almost always the director's there. And at the last minute, they're like, I don't like that horn there. Can we change that out? It's like, why didn't you say this like 3 months ago when we were working for the cue? But yeah, so there'll be a lot of changes in the booth, and it was very great learning experience seeing how directors want to change things and then being able to do that on the fly. The conductor or Marco or in the booth or on the stand, changing that on the fly was eye-opening.
that would be nerve-wracking having like Guillermo del Toro looking over your shoulder while you're composing.
Some composers like doing that. And I think Hans Zimmer does that quite a bit. He's happy having directors in the room. I'm too self-conscious. I can't even have my wife in the room while I can't even having someone listening outside the door. I'm just like, go away. It's for me. I'm not able to do that. I mean, I have done it and it's been okay, but it's not my preferred way of working. I prefer kind of just being on my own.
I'm kind of the same way with anything I write. I'm like, I'll play it for you when I'm done.
Right.
let me cook it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about NightWatch. Demons Are Forever.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So the director Ole Bornedal, it's a Danish film, and Ola had worked with Marco actually for many years, many years, and I'd actually orchestrated on a film he made called I Am Dina, which was a Norwegian set film, period piece, lovely film. And 20 years ago, we went to Cologne to record that, and I guess Ola remembered me, and then fast forward 20 years, and Ola was making a film called The Bombardment, which is on Netflix, which is a fantastic World War II movie about the RAF bombing Copenhagen, which I recommend people watch. It's a tough watch. It's about children and a lot of suffering, but it's a really amazingly made movie. Anyway,
Children war movies.
Yeah,
we were talking a few episodes back about Come and See. That's a tough one.
Yeah, well, yeah, they tend to be tough, but it was really creatively really fun to do, and Marco and Buck were on it for a while, and then during the pandemic, I think, and then it was kind of one of those projects that sort of drags on, and then Marco brought me in, and the three of us worked on it and finished the film, and had a lot of fun with it, and Ola really liked what I did, and so Ola's next film was NightWatch, Demons Are Forever, which is a sequel to the original NightWatch from 1994, the Danish original NightWatch, not the remake with Ewan McGregor from 1997. So,
right.
So Ola said, "Do you want to work on scoring this film, NightWatch, Demons Are Forever?" And of course, I jumped at the chance.
What was it like taking on? Because it is a sequel to a 30-year-old movie. Was that a bit intimidating, taking on that legacy of it?
Well, I mean, I didn't know I had seen the Ewan McGregor one like only a few years ago, actually. So for me, it wasn't it wasn't that intimidating because it wasn't like I was, doing Star Wars or anything. And I hadn't seen the original Danish one, and I watched the original Danish one, and musically, it's not sort of my wheelhouse. Like what the composer did worked really well, but it's not what I was planning to do on this one. And luckily, Ola said, "I don't want the music to be anything like the original." So I was like, phew. But not only that, the cool thing was there was no temp music. Ola didn't use any temp in the film at all, which was, and for people who don't know what temp music is, when directors and editors are making the cut, they put in temporary music before the composer starts working as a sort of an idea for what they want the score to sound like, and also for test screenings, so audiences can hear it with music before the composer gets to work. So Ola had really not put any temp, or so little, and then I think they took it out. So I never really heard any temp at all. And for me, that's quite unusual. And it's really nice to not be pressured by a temp, because directors live with temps for so long and they get so attached to them subconsciously, not even realizing it. And then if you do something that's different to the temp or way off, sometimes the director can't deal with it and they draw you back to the temp. And so the idea of not having any temp for me was great, because I had a total blank slate. He said, "I don't want it to be like the original at all. I want you to do something completely new." And it was a good direction. So yeah, that was a good experience.
Now, how often did Ole get to hear, as you were working on it, were you sending him, kind of like dailies, or, at what point would he hear it and say, "No, you're on the wrong track, go back"?
It wasn't dailies, but it was probably every few days or every week. I'd send him a bunch of cues, and he would, get his reaction. Then, as far as him changing his mind, that did happen sometimes. Ola sometimes has a change of heart, and because we started out, he sort of wanted it very electronic, wanted really synth-based, and I started out very synth-based. And as the film progressed, he realized, no, I want more string sounds. And so I brought in more strings, and it got a bit more cinematic, especially as the movie progresses, the orchestra comes in more. So that was an evolving process. But yeah, it was all remote. Of course, he's in Copenhagen, I'm in LA, but that wasn't difficult.
A lot of it is also just piano. Did you produce it all like in your studio, or was there an orchestra at any point?
No, there's no. I did piano here, and actually, there's no, apart from piano, there's no live instruments. It's all in the studio. There's no budget, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, it's a lower budget production.
Yep.
So it was all of the stuff that sounds orchestral, strings and stuff, that was all synthesized then.
Correct. I mean, actually sampled. So they are real instruments that have been recorded and then reproduced. But it's a bit of a gray area because I've made my own library of sounds using some solo cello, some bass clarinet, some piano, some double bass. I've actually made my own sounds, having recorded musicians on previous films and for various things. So they're real played instruments. They're just not recorded specifically for that cue. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and they're not, it's not from a sample library that you can buy. You recorded all your own.
Yeah. It's custom made sounds. Exactly. Yeah. Which I love doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said back a while, you're a pianist. Is that your instrument?
Yeah. Well, I'm a bad pianist. Trumpet was my first instrument. I played a lot of jazz trumpet and an orchestral trumpet. But yeah, these days I basically just play. I do play a little bit of brass with some friends once a week, but that's more of a recent resurgence or renaissance of my trumpet playing. But really, I spend all day at the keyboard and at the piano.
Because the piano in NightWatch, I thought was fantastic. So, I mean, you say that you're a bad pianist, but hey, sounded good to me.
Well, in the studio, you can cut and paste and fix and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to play those on stage, put it that way.
Oh, no worries. We do the same with the podcast. So,
yeah, we know all about painting and cutting.
And, so when we were reached out for this, we were told that you did some interesting things with moth sounds and recording moths for it.
I am dying to hear about this. Yeah.
I've been sitting here just like, I want to talk about the moths. Sorry.
Moth sounds that you recorded for this. First of all, how'd you even come up with the idea for that?
Well, it was actually Ola's idea because in the original film, there's a moth in the light fixture in the guard's office, I think. Right. And then that theme comes back in the new one, and there's this flapping moth, and he liked that sort of trope that comes back, but also the character of Bent in the film, who's the creepy bald guy.
Yeah,
bald. I think. Yeah, no, he's got white hair.
It's really short though.
Yeah. So that guy, Ola, his direction, because although there was no temp music, he did give me notes. It's like, I want music. He basically told me where he wanted score and also what kind of score perhaps he wanted at certain places. Not all the time. But for Ben's character, he thought, I want it to be like an insect. So he didn't say moth. And then I thought, well, that moth sound is cool. So why don't we record a moth? And then see what we can do with that sound. So we live in Topanga Canyon and there's a lot of moths. And the light outside our front door actually attracts moths. So I got a good microphone and I recorded Mr. or Mrs. Moth and I took it in and I saw what we could do with it. And it's a cool sound because when the wings are flapping really fast, it creates a tone. It's like bzz, that's what buzzing is really. It's really fast flapping. It's a percussive sound that's so fast that it creates a pitch. So there's that sound which can act like a kind of a synthesized bzz sort of sound. But then you start slowing it down and pitching it down, it turns into a rhythm, kind of a pulsation. And so this one sound source is creating both rhythm and pitch, which for me was really interesting. And then you can start manipulating it and screwing with it and really having fun with it. So that sort of became the Bent signature sound. It's really not a theme, it's a sound. So.
I've never even noticed that moths have a sound. I know flies and bees and all, but moths have always struck me as silent. So
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say buzz. It's more of like a when the wings are flapping really fast, it's a
yeah,
right? And
Yeah.
and if you start isolating frequencies with EQ, it can turn into a pitch. You're sort of finding the implied pitch in the flapping, and then the minute you slow it down, then it starts getting creepier.
I'm just impressed that you were even able to get a recording of a moth. I mean, that's a good microphone you got there.
Yeah. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh man, that's not something you think about. Like you said, flies or beetles or something like that have more like, distinct, but like, yeah, that's really cool. And it does tie into the themes and what have you. Because yeah, as soon as like that scene came up where she's like fixing the light fixture and they have all the moths in it, I was like, oh, I gotta know about the moths, man.
The challenge is finding one moth. It's not often you find one. It's lots of moths, no moths, right? But finding one moth is the hard thing. So,
Did the moth get credit on the soundtrack?
no, I am guilty as charged. I'm afraid it didn't. I didn't know its name.
You don't know where to send the check to the union?
It should have had better representation.
So what is next for you? What do you got anything in the cooker?
Yeah, I'm doing another doc series about UFOs and the government conspiracy behind UFOs. It was the first season was for Nat Geo. Came out a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago. It's called UFOs. It kept changing its name. It's UFO something. Anyway, I'll have to look it up. And then the second season we're doing right now. Again for Nat Geo, 6 episodes. And then after that, I'm doing the third season of a show called Delhi Crime, which is a Netflix series set in India. It's a crime drama in Hindi and English. It's an Indian US co-production, and I did the second season for them a year or two ago, and now we're going to be working on the third season in the fall.
That's awesome. Is it UFOs investigating the unknown?
That's the one. Yep. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Especially if they're changing their titles all the time, and it's always
no. The working title kept changing, and so when the final thing comes out, I can't remember what it is, but yeah. So there's that. But also, I recently released an album of non-film music. It's just like a solo album, and that's called Soul in the Machine, and that's on Spotify and Apple. All the streamers, and I'm that was a really fun project to do, and I got these music videos made. I got 4 music videos made for those tracks. So,
what kind of music is it?
It's mostly instrumental. There's some vocal stuff. Some of it's quite experimental. Some of it's kind of mostly using one live instrument, like a violin or a cello, with electronics.
Okay.
Of the approach, and it's I mean, check it out. It's hard to explain, but I guess it's somewhat cinematic, but none of them are written with picture. It's just tracks, which I really like. So I hope people like it and respond.
And it's just under your name, Ceiri Torjussen?
Exactly, yeah. And the album's Soul in the Machine. Follow me on, Spotify, etc.
And that's streaming everywhere that you can stream stuff?
Yep. That's Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, Tidal, all of the streamers. No CDs, unfortunately. Although there is a CD release. There's an album release for NightWatch soundtrack. There's also a CD release for the NightWatch soundtrack if you guys live in the 1990s and still play a CD in your car, which I do occasionally in my car only. So those are available.
We live in the 70s and we're back on vinyl. So
yeah,
just a bit. Yeah.
I wanted to ask this earlier. What are some modern composers that you're excited about? Do you ever hear other composers and just think, oh, what they're doing is great? Who are some of those people?
You mean like film composers or?
Yes, film composers.
Film composers. Recently, I don't know. I've been really digging what Colin Stetson has done. He scored the first Ari Aster movie. What's it called?
Oh, Hereditary.
Hereditary. Did a great job on that. So his stuff is really cool. I still love Marco's music. He comes out with some amazing stuff in every film. Who else am I digging? I really liked been watching what's the Slow Horses? Have you seen Slow Horses on Apple?
Mm-mm.
It's a show on Apple. It's about spies. It's a British show. Gary Oldman plays this sort of MI5 boss. It's a really cool show, and Daniel Pemberton does a really cool original score for that, which I highly recommend. So yeah,
Have you heard the Swiss Army Man score?
I haven't, but it's Son Lux, right?
No, it's Manchester Orchestra.
Oh,
It's the guys from Manchester Orchestra that do it.
Okay.
And the funny thing, I love this score, so I always try to turn people onto it. It's pretty much all vocals. They sing all of the melody and harmony lines. I mean, there's a little bit of keyboards, of synthesizer in there, but it's mostly just all vocal. And they do things like they'll do like the Jurassic Park theme, but like a vocal arrangement.
Oh,
I mean,
cool.
it's pretty cool. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah, the guys that made that though, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
The Son Lux score to that movie was fantastic.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was really amazing. I've never heard a score like that in ever. I think it was really original.
Another composer that I don't know if you're familiar with, Mika Levy,
Yeah, I love her stuff. Yep, yep. Under the Skin. Yep.
Zone of Interest. Jackie was the other one. It's like the big high profile. Yeah,
Yeah, that was really good.
pretty much Jonathan Glazer's composer.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's an excellent violinist, and she does a lot of layering of violin in the studio, which is, you can't beat that when you.
yeah. But the stuff is just such a mood. It almost borders on sound design a little bit. When those I love those soundtracks. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun turning sound design into music and vice versa. I did that on a film called The Canal, which I scored as a horror film from about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Canal.
Which is really creepy. And on that one, I recorded a lot of cello and a lot of bass clarinet and piano. And basically, the objective was to try to make sounds that were not recognizable, but were not synths. So I recorded live instruments and then played them in such weird ways that you have no idea what the instrument is, to try to make this, and very close mic'd. So it's kind of an unnerving sound. And when critics reviewed the film, they were sort of talking about the sound design in various scenes, and they didn't realize it was actually my score.
Yeah. How did we know that the guy who records Moths for his score would be would like to play with sound design with the score?
Right.
That's awesome. Okay, Ceiri,
that's
well,
great.
thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I always love talking to the composers because, as a music geek myself. Where can people find you to keep up with what you got going on next? Are you on the social medias?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm kind of on Twitter, although I've almost given up.
Understandable.
But my website is ceiri.com, CEIRI.com, and I have a news page that I try to keep up to date. And then I'm on, you can follow me on Spotify or Apple Music, and I have a lot of albums already out there.
That domain name for your website's a score. Just your firstname.com. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You got
Yeah,
that.
only having an unusual name for that reason only.
I can't do that with John or Jonathan. It's all right. That's super taken.
John.com.
Yeah. I do own jamesjedwards.com though. So
Oh, there you go.
I was the first one to that. Well, cool. Thanks again for joining us today. I love talking to these composers because I just love hearing how the music is created for these movies that we love so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Our theme music, speaking of music, is by Restless Spirit, so go give them a listen. Our artwork is by Chris Fisher, so go give him a look. You can find us on the socials at Ion Horror at pretty much everywhere. We haven't given up on Twitter yet, although, well, personally I have, but the podcast hasn't. And or you can find us at Ion Horror, which is the website we all call home. And everybody watch NightWatch Demons Are Forever. It's on Shudder, and listen specifically for Ceiri Torjussen's score. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. So for me, James J. Edwards.
I'm Jacob Davison.
I'm Jonathan Correia.
And I'm Ceiri Torjussen.
Keep your eye on horror.